into a conversation here today that's going to jump all around and talk about a ton of interesting things. Make sure you stick around to the end. With that being said, welcome to the podcast, guys. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Chance. We are so honored to be on this podcast and to dive into a beautiful conversation around food, agriculture, and blockchain potentially.
Yeah, I'm excited. You guys got a lot of information. I'm definitely going to pick your brain a little bit. But before we get things started, let's dive into your guys' background. If you want to just give everybody kind of a feel of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so individually or collectively?
Whatever you guys want. You can go either way with it.
Okay, sweet. I could give you a short individual bit and then I could talk a bit about us as a collective. So I'm from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And I've found myself doing work in digital product space for the last 10 years. So helping companies really understand human and cultural insight, understand different demographics, different trends, different industries, and think about how can we create new innovation in that space. So that's really been what I've been up to for the last decade, and just kind of been honing in on that from an engineering perspective, from a UX design perspective, from a strategy perspective. Outside of work-related things, I love everything outdoors, whether that's surfing, hiking, gardening, anything outdoors. I'm all for it. Awesome. And that's a bit about me. And in terms of collectively, Cam and I met 3.5 years ago in Bali, Indonesia. And Groove with Gaia actually started off with us hosting silent discos on the beach. So we started getting groups of people together to gather on the beach and listen to the same music all at the same time and just have a dance party on the beach.
Nice.
And that's how Groove with Gaia was born. And it wasn't until we ended up in lockdown in Oregon that we actually began making digital content, and that kind of led us to where we are today and how you found us. And I'll let Cam say a little bit about her background.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Hong Kong, and my background over the last several years have been within the space of oceanography. So I've been studying the oceans for quite a while. And when we met in Bali, I was doing conservation science work for an organization called the Coral Triangle Center. And I recently finished up my master's in natural resources and environmental management, and just now enjoying the world of entrepreneurship with Groove with Gaia and figuring out how best to create content that brings good into the world and gets people inspired to play outdoors, move their body, get connected to their food. And so, yeah, we're really excited to be here and to engage in this conversation with you.
Awesome. Let's dive right in then. You said it there at the end, the conversation about food. And with this podcast, we like to focus on food. And one thing that really drew me to you guys is you kind of have the same background as I do with how you ate with going vegan for a while. So I was vegan for over 2 years and then switched back to the meats. And that was really just in the past couple of years. So I would be curious to kind of hear your guys' story with that and how that transition went and kind of why.
Yeah, so for me, I started or stopped eating red meat when I was 12 years old. And that happened because I had a dream and a cow was talking to me. And I literally woke up the next morning and told my family I can't eat red meat anymore. And so for many, many years, I was mostly like vegetarian, pescatarian. And then the last 5 years, I've been vegan with the occasional local honey here and there, but mostly a vegan diet. And we've changed to more of an animal-based diet over the last 3 months. And that transition really occurred after our time in Costa Rica. We actually did a quite intensive plant medicine ceremony. And after that that vision quest, we both started to implement animal foods back into our diet. And it's been a transition, and we still feel like we're in a experimentation phase, just really feeling into what feels good for our bodies, as well as what feels good in terms of supporting the local farmers here in this beautiful mountainous region of North Carolina. So that's a little bit about the background, and Eli has a little bit of a different story around his diet.
Yeah. I think we had very different upbringings in regards to food. You know, when Cam was little, she was eating shark fin soup, and my mom was giving me tofu and stuff that I did not want to eat or bring to school, but she would make me bring it to school. And so I grew up with a veggie forward mother. And we did have meat involved, but mostly just white meat, no red meat, and very veg forward. Now, once I started to be able to make my own food choices, that all went out the window, and I just wanted to eat what my friends were eating. And so that's when I really started experimenting with different types of animal proteins. And then in 2016, I watched Cowspiracy, and I immediately stopped eating meat after that. I just took everything at face value, and was one of those people that was just from 2016 onward for the next 3 years, probably just reciting statistics from Cowspiracy. And I almost had
me in about 2 years later, so that's all right. I know know how that feels.
Yeah. And I feel like I almost developed a bit of dogmatism around it, just because I'm very conscious of how I live my life and the impact that I have with my life, the impact of my actions. And after seeing that film, and that led me down a rabbit hole of really understanding that, or at least the initial understanding was eating meat is bad for the environment. Therefore, I'm mindful of my impact on the environment. I'm not going to eat meat. And so that was the narrative for a bit. Eventually, fast forward to like this year, earlier this year, I got really curious just about experimenting with just how I feel physically in my body, and wondering, if I just try to incorporate different animal proteins just in an experimental fashion, wanting to see how that changes how I show up in my life and how I feel in my day-to-day life. And then, as Cam said, we went down to Costa Rica and took part in a vision quest. And I came out of that vision quest thinking about hunting. So something happened during that vision quest that kind of brought some different things online for me in terms of my connection to animals and animal meat. And so, since then, we've been incorporating a lot more animal products into our diets.
And I guess another big piece of that transition, prior to going to Costa Rica, we were already thinking about how we could reduce our waste, and really thinking about, okay, how could we transition to more of a zero waste lifestyle? And so we were recognizing that a lot of the foods that we were getting from the grocery store were packaged in plastic or aluminum cans. And so part of this transition to more of an animal-based diet is now we're sourcing directly from farmers, and most of the foods that we're eating has no packaging, or it's in reusable packaging like egg cartons or glass containers that we actually return back to the farmers. And so they're able to reuse that for selling to other folks, which is amazing.
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. One thing I gotta ask, because so you said on the vision quest, you saw hunting. Has that piqued your interest? Because I'm an avid deer hunter. It's one of my passions. It's what I love to do, and like building habitats and places for the wildlife to thrive. But is that something that's been on your radar at all since that?
Yes, it's something that has come up for me. And the way I thought about it initially, I was like, let's try eating animal protein and see how that feels. And if that feels good, if that feels like something I want to continue with, then the next step is seeing how I can source that food myself. And so the answer to that question is yes. And I'm totally open to learning and having that experience. It's not something I've ever done before. I've never held a gun before in my life. But it's something that now at this point in my life, I find myself completely open to it and completely recognize that, to me, hunting is the most ethical way that we can consume meat.
Yeah, that's something that is such a stretch from like the narrative that's out there, is because as hunters, we control what the wildlife get to, like which wildlife get to thrive. The best way to have a wildlife thrive, any species, is to give it a hunting tag, because all the hunters, we want to, well, not all, there's always the bad. That's what everyone wants to put us all in a box. Like there's always a bad. Yes, you're going to find a couple of people that don't think like this, but the majority of hunters that I know, that I listen to, it's all about focusing on improving the habitat so the wildlife can thrive. Because us as humans, so for out here in Missouri, like I know that deer are going to struggle with food in the fall and winter, because that's when all the hay fields dry up. So when I put in food plots, I can feed 20, 30 deer. And if I harvest one a year, two maybe, it's like, okay, well, 28 others got to thrive. And you talk about the quality of protein you get to put in the freezer, is it lives completely free. It does what it wants every single day. So no, that's something I had to touch on. We might have to get in contact, and I'll hook you up. I like archery hunting. That's a whole nother little
wow.
But doing it with a bow is extra fun. So that might be something we have to get you out here to Missouri and get you on a deer.
Oh, hey, yeah, I'm so down for that. I also feel like bow hunting is harder, but that's just my perception.
Yeah.
I've never.
Oh, it's way harder.
Okay.
It's because you got to get in closer. The average archery kill is like 20 yards. Compared to a gun, it could be 400 yards. So like 4 football fields are like 20 yards is almost as far as you could, you could hit them with a football if you wanted to. So it's like the element of really the skill, because those animals are amazing creatures, and they know how to survive. They're really good at it.
Right.
So with that transition of going to meat, what were kind of the first couple meals, the first couple thoughts you had on that step? Because it's definitely a change, especially from the background you guys are talking about. It's not like you tried being vegan for a while. It was part of your lifestyle. Yeah. How was that change for you?
My first reaction was like, damn, this is tasty. I was like, wow, I forgot how good meat actually tastes. I think that must have been my first reaction. And then there was a lot that came up after that, just noticing differences in my energy levels on a day-to-day basis. And not like I was low energy when I was eating plant-based and high energy when I was eating meat, but I just noticed a bit more of a consistency in my energy level, just like a consistency from the moment that I wake up to the moment I go to sleep when I am incorporating some of these foods. What other things came up? What came up for you?
Well, I know one thing for you, babe, was the muscle. Like you felt like your muscles were more defined pretty like quickly for him. For me, I feel like I'm feeling stronger, but I also felt pretty strong on a plant-based diet. And so I think the transition of my body composition is going to take a little bit longer, just the nature of my biology versus his. And the energy piece, I definitely resonate with. I definitely feel a more consistent level of energy across the day. And my mind feels a bit sharper, not as I wouldn't say tired, but I think there have been like phases where I would feel a bit more exhausted. And I think that had to do a lot with connection to my menstrual cycle. And so I am still feeling some fatigue around different parts of my menstrual cycle, but I am noticing a bit more consistency and less like big jumps in energy changes, which is nice. But yeah, for me, I still feel like we need more time to really experience and notice these changes, and not just feel like it's placebo or something else. Like I really want to be intentional about focusing on, okay, how am I really feeling in this moment after eating this sort of meal, and just really being finely tuned in with the food that we're eating, and just seeing how that impacts our daily lives over time.
Yeah, one word you said there was intentional. And I think this is something that a lot of people like, especially me, like, so when I went vegan, it was like, I was going from eating fast food to eating like fruits and veggies. So like I felt way better. And it's like, you know, it's one of those things where I was like, for the first year, I'm like, this is amazing. I'm losing weight. And it's like, but then I look back and I'm like, Chance, that's the first time you ate healthy in like 20 years. So like, no wonder. So I want to talk about that because I think it's interesting. You didn't just go back to going to Walmart and getting the cheapest piece of meat off the freezer and just saying, oh, whatever I put in my body, I put in my body. So what was that kind of process of saying, okay, this is the type of meat that we want to consume? And could you kind of walk me through how that went for you?
Yeah, so when we returned from Costa Rica, we are very fortunate that in our area, we have an abundance of farmers markets here. And so we went to our favorite farmers market, and because it was still quite cold, there wasn't a lot of produce. So there wasn't a lot of fruits and vegetables available. And most of the stands were animal farms that focus on regenerative practices. And we decided, okay, this will be a very different farmers market haul compared to what we have done in the past, and decided to support these animal farms. And so we've been eating mostly 100% grass-fed beef. And we do go to a butcher where we can get our beef without any plastic wrap. We bring glass containers and have them put the beef in there. And that butcher, they do finish with corn, which is something that we're still trying to understand and just take note of. But then, yeah, our local eggs we get from the Wild Way farm, and the farmer has actually become a good friend of ours. And so we'll get chicken eggs, duck eggs, geese eggs, and it's all free range, pasture raised. And we are able to return the egg cartons, which is awesome. And then we've been experimenting a little bit with dairy. So we really enjoy getting local pasture-raised sheep milk yogurt. And that yogurt comes in
milk.
Yeah, sheep milk.
Okay, that's interesting. There's people out there doing everything, I swear.
Yeah, I mean, we even have had raw sheep milk and tried ingesting that, which was a bit more difficult on the digestive system, I think, compared to the yogurt. But yeah, we've been playing around with different foods, and I think it has been really beautiful, just the simplicity of these foods, and that we don't need to eat that much to feel full and nourished.
Yeah, and just
with the dairy, have you dove into any other the raw dairy? I gotta ask, because that's what we just do. We got a local farmer, and we recently switched 2 months ago, and I'll never go back. The raw dairy is so good. The cream on the top is like amazing. It's just one of those things. Have you guys tried the raw dairy yet?
We only have had raw sheep's milk dairy. So that's the only kind that we've had.
People need to look up. We had goats before, so I knew about goat milk, but I didn't even know they had sheep milk. That's a new thing for me.
Yeah, it's definitely a new thing for us too. And there's only one stand at our farmers market that sells raw sheep's milk and raw or sheep milk yogurt. She also does like a feta from the sheep dairy as well, which is incredible. But yeah, we haven't experimented too much with goat's milk or cow's milk yet.
Got you. Nice. Yeah, there's so much to experiment with, especially when you guys are going down this this lane, because the regenerative agriculture, that's kind of where I want to go and ask your guys' input on that and the what you guys see it doing for the environment. But with where you guys are going to these farmers markets, for those of you who don't go to farmers markets, first of all, if you live in a city or even the suburbs, you probably have a farmers market. Go find it, go look it up. But the farmers that are there, these are people who are just natural entrepreneurs that want to heal the land and take care of animals, and the types of quality products that they're putting together. I mean, just hearing your guys' list is amazing. But when you look into regenerative agriculture, what caught your interest with that? And are there anything, because you said in the beginning about how the environment was important to you. You're watching the Cowspiracy and it was like, okay, cows bad for the environment, I'm done eating meat.
Yeah.
So what about regenerative agriculture kind of changed your opinion on that?
Yeah, so maybe like a year after, or the same year I watched Cowspiracy, I started going out and working on permaculture projects around the region in Southeast Asia. I was living in Singapore at the time.
Okay.
And so I started getting those experiences. And then eventually I ended up doing a permaculture design certification and really diving into
break down, sorry, real quick. Could you break down what permaculture is? Because I know what it is, but there might be somebody on here that doesn't know. Could you break that down so people know what you're talking about?
Yeah, totally. So permaculture is it's technically a design science, but it was started by these two guys in Australia, and it is essentially marrying the terms permanent and agriculture, of how we can create a permanent agriculture in which we are working with the elements of nature instead of destroying or depleting or severely manipulating the elements of nature. And so that's the baseline principle. And permaculture extends far beyond food even, right? We're looking at living systems. So that includes food, that includes energy, that includes water, that includes shelter. And how do we actually work with the elements and with the flow of nature to create self-sustaining and regenerative systems? Awesome. So once I got my hands wet with permaculture, it had me thinking about animals in a bit of a different way, because I started to really recognize and understand the role that animals play within an ecosystem, and also understanding that we wouldn't have these ecosystems if it weren't for animals, point blank.
Yeah.
You know, there are no animalless ecologies, right? Even the most recent islands on planet Earth that are now super abundant with lots of green, we can thank the animals for that. You know, we can thank the birds for that, for transporting seeds. So it's like, we can't really remove animals from the equation. And I think I started to recognize that they play such a key role in soil health. They play such a key role in the health of plant life. They play such a key role in all aspects of a natural ecosystem. And so I think that's what started tuning me into the benefits and the idea of regenerative agriculture. But then it still took me some time to actually get around to incorporating that. But yeah.
Definitely, man, there's so much said right there. What are some of the, I gotta just ask, what are some of the things that they do different in Asia that you might have saw when you were, because that's just, I mean, I've seen pictures, I can't imagine actually being out there on the land and working with all that. What are some things that they're doing different there that maybe we aren't doing here, or just hasn't quite caught on mainstream here from an agriculture / permaculture lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think generally from my experiences, and it actually started before the Cowspiracy, now that I think about it, 2014 is when I first went and did a woofing experience in Asia. And I think that generally my experiences there versus how we tend to set things up here in the US, I think that those experiences I had there, they tend to use more of the animals elements. They tend to be more resourceful with stuff, even down to the poop, even down to the cow poop. You know, I was in India building a building, like reinforcing a building structure with cow poop. So it's like I
You're
was in
using it
Thailand
to use to make this actual structure.
to make to reinforce the walls and
Wow.
reinforce
Okay, like
yeah,
cement. Yeah.
reinforce the whole building with cow poop.
Mm.
So just layers of cow poop. And sure, here we use it as compost and manure, but there they use it as compost and manure as well as a building material.
Mhm.
um in some places also like a very holy substance as well, the dung. And so I think there's just different of a more diverse variety of uses of different things that I've noticed. Even like, I remember being in Thailand at a farm, and some really big bugs came flying into the room and just started dropping on the floor. And in the States, I think it would be uh, very out there to think to eat those insects.
Yeah.
But in Thailand, the woman I was staying with, she was like, hey, let's, pick one up, let's eat it. It's like good. And so I just think there's a bit more resourcefulness in terms of using everything that is around.
Yeah. And one thing that I always hear when I'm going into the regenerative agriculture area is allowing the animal to be the animal. Allow a pig to be a pig, a cow to be a cow. So it sounds like what you're saying there is a lot of times over there, they allow the animal to go to its fullest extent, instead of what I see in our commercial agriculture system here is we try to confine and refine the animal to do what we want, not what it's supposed to do. So I'm curious with that, what are kind of some of the things, because I don't want people to get on here and be like, oh, you said that all this stuff was wrong, because there definitely are some bad side effects to how we raise our food in America to the environment. What are some of those that are kind of on your guys' radar that you're watching or that you know about from the agriculture arena that would be a reason why you pay the extra dollar and go look for the local farmer?
Yeah, well, I think that the big distinction is like you're naming industrial agriculture. And I think on the flip side of that is industrial agriculture.
Okay.
At some point, I would hope that industrial and regenerative merge together, and we have like regenerative agriculture that can,
At scale.
feed an abundance of people at scale.
That's the goal of
However,
our ranch. So we're working on that. That's what we're working for.
awesome. Yeah, I love that. But right now, a lot of industrial agricultural practices, which some people may know as factory farming, have a lot of negative side effects. And some of those negative side effects are that it's commonplace to not let that animal be the animal, as you're saying, and instead forcing them into certain ways of being and forcing them into certain confined spaces and certain ways of living, and injecting them with different chemicals that they're not asking them to, and feeding them food that they are naturally not eating and did not evolve to eat, and having very just inhumane practices in that way. And also, when you have a bunch of cows or chickens together, like in confined spaces, and not actually moving around the land and doing what they need to do, it just creates a lot more negative environmental impacts, right? Because now you just have a ton of cows that are sitting in this space, and yes, they're pooping and they're farting and they're emitting these greenhouse gases, right? But if that is in a holistically managed regenerative system, those cows are grazing, those cows are actually providing benefits to the soil, which is a huge carbon sink. It's the largest carbon sink we have. And so it balances out if you are doing this in the way that flows with nature. Industrial agriculture, there's a lot of negative side effects that unfortunately we don't have to pay for with our dollars. It's actually the opposite. It's actually less expensive to get the more harmful food.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, that's just some of the things that come up when you ask that.
And even industrial agriculture for fruits and vegetables has a lot of does a lot of harm to the environment as well. Just the use of toxic chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, a lot of tilling that's digging up these important microbial ecosystems. And within those industries too, the people are, the workers a lot of times are not being honored or respected. And that leads to a lot of, human suffering, which is quite unfortunate as well.
Yeah. And a lot, and even along with that, like monocultures in general, if nature teaches us anything, it's that diversity creates resilience, and diversity thrives. And as Cam's alluding to, I think that there's just this inherent notion that eating vegan or eating plant-based is better in a lot of ways, but there's so much that goes into that comparing meat to plants is not even the best comparison to sustainable or regenerative eating. It's really about the quality of the food and the sources and the conditions that it's from.
Yeah, you guys like literally jumped 3 questions in my list. Like right there, you just gave it all. So I do want to go back to one thing you said about the carbon sink, because that's something that I hear a lot, and I kind of understand it. I'm learning, but could you explain that for everybody? What is a carbon sink and why is it so important that we have them?
You want to go or you want me to go?
You can start. And I'll
Okay.
add.
So carbon has been made to seem like it is this demonic substance that is destroying our planet.
Yeah,
it's not. It's actually in a lot of ways, the foundation of matter on this planet and what supports us on this planet. Carbon is what plants breathe out, or it's what plants breathe in and we breathe out. And then we're doing the opposite with oxygen, right? So it's such an important element, and it's been almost villainized, but it's really the way that we are. It's that the carbon's not able to do what the carbon wants to do.
Yeah.
Because right now, a lot of greenhouse gases are being trapped in the atmosphere. And now it's burning holes through the ozone layer, etc. And that's just because it doesn't have, we're producing an excess amount of carbon with our lifestyles, and B, that excess carbon has nowhere to go. And so soil inherently, it stores this gas, it stores these gases, stores these elements within the soil itself. And what we're doing globally with industrial agriculture is we're tilling the soil and we're breaking up these soil ecosystems that have taken years and years and years to form. And now it can no longer hold that carbon. It can no longer hold those elements. And therefore now it all just ends up rising up into our atmosphere and sitting there, right? And now we have what's known as the greenhouse effect. And therefore the planet is warming up.
Which is causing all sorts of changes in different weather systems and causing natural disasters to happen more frequently and at higher intensity. And so, soil is so important when it comes to sequestering carbon in our atmosphere. And so a lot of these plants, they need the carbon to turn into simple sugars to be able to produce their leaves and stems and roots. And when those roots die, that's when the microorganisms within the soil, they'll usually eat that dead root, and some of it will still be released into the atmosphere, but some of that will also be stored in the soil and can stay there for thousands and thousands of years. But because of our lifestyle, like what Eli was saying, we are just releasing so much carbon into the atmosphere, and it's causing really detrimental impacts to our planet. And for a lot of like island ecosystems, we're seeing the warming of the planet starting to they're losing their land, because of the increase in sea level, because of the global warming situation that we are facing at this moment. And so soil definitely is such an important player when it comes to facing and figuring out how to combat climate change.
Yeah, and I think what doesn't help culturally is that we call soil dirt. you know, and just the way that we use that word dirt, you know, saying something's dirty or this is dirty, that just the connotation that we have with the word dirt and the fact that we call soil dirt, I think culturally has an impact as well, because we don't actually respect it for what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So I grew up in Illinois. So for those of you who don't know, Illinois is the monoculture capital of the world. I mean, it's just corn and soybeans as far as the eye can see. And the one thing that you guys are talking about that is so true with the vegan mindset of like, oh, I'm eating fruits and vegetables, or I'm eating, man, I was so guilty. When I was vegan, my favorite thing was a Beyond Burger. And now I look at like the ingredients on that thing and I'm like, man, that wasn't the best decision to make. But when we look at those monocultures and we look at, now I live out here in Missouri and it's just rolling green hills. It's cattle country. There's just green grass and so diverse. And you never like, it is the weirdest thing if you see a crop field and it's like, my wife always points them out. She's like, why is that patch of dead dirt over there? You know, it's like, that's her image when she sees a crop field right next to a pasture that has all these green grasses and all this different, the microbes are in different species. It's crazy. So if we could kind of dive into that just a little bit more on understanding when we're eating from a monoculture, meaning one single thing is growing in that spot, what are those negative effects to the environment compared to the multi-species environment?
Yeah, so with a monoculture, the issues that arise with that is quite diverse. So disease is able to spread a lot faster and be a lot more damaging because of the lack of diversity of species.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of nutrients get depleted from the soil, and that's why they need these chemicals to come in and help the soil get nutrients again. Any other ones coming up for you, babe?
Those are the two.
Those are the main ones that come up for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
the disease one is huge, right? It's just
Mhm.
like a massive decrease in resilience. And if a disease catches on, it can spread and effectively take out a whole crop. If you scale that to an extreme, it can take out a whole species.
yeah.
You know?
I just checked the time and I can't believe how fast this is going. So I got one last question I gotta ask before we end this, because I was looking at your guys' Instagram and I kept seeing this stuff about blockchain. So I've been in the crypto world for a while. I'm in the trading realm. So I know all about blockchain, but how do you guys see blockchain and the saving of the environment coming together? Because that's something that kind of blew my mind when I started seeing you guys' content on it.
Yeah, I think it blew a lot of people's minds as well, and maybe for a different reason than yours. When we first started creating content around blockchain, we realized that there's this really big perception of blockchain as destroying the environment.
Oh,
You know,
really?
and that's just like that seemed to be like the overarching viewpoint of people engaging with our content, was that blockchain is destroying the environment. And I think that's just because the two largest cryptocurrencies that we have, which by market cap, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum, are both using a certain consensus mechanism that is very energy consumptive. But what they're not recognizing is that there are lots of other blockchain networks that are operating in a different way that is a lot less harmful for the environment. And so we see the potential impact of blockchain on creating a more regenerative future. And what it allows us to do, I think the thing that excites us the most about blockchain is that it allows us to program incentives in different ways. It allows us to align incentives in different ways. It allows us to connect the data that we're getting to value of a currency in different ways, right? And so one example of that, and maybe a video that we made a bit ago, was about regenerative finance and this concept of regenerative finance. And putting forth these ideas of natural capital-backed currency, which is an idea that was from Sacred Economics from Charles Eisenstein some years ago. And it's this notion that instead of backing currency with what we're backing it with now, which is essentially nothing, and previously was nothing, previously was gold, instead of doing what we're doing now, why don't we realign incentives so that we are backing currencies with the health of natural resources, right? And so when he wrote that book, it was some years ago, but now we actually have people that are working on these solutions within blockchain and with blockchain networks, and thinking about how can we back a currency with healthy rainforests? You know, how can we actually have the value of a currency be determined by the health of an ecosystem? And that may seem like a pretty far out there idea, but we're actually working on this right now. Like, there are people that are working on bringing these ideas to life right now. And when you think about gold and being backed by the gold standard, that was something that you can melt down, put into a nice tight format and store it away and keep count of it really easily. You can't really do the same thing with a forest. You know, you can't really do the same thing with a river. You can't really do the same thing with these natural elements. But now with satellite imaging and machine learning, we can actually track the health of a forest ecosystem and produce digital data from that. Now, if you can produce digital data representing the health of a forest ecosystem, you can tie that data to the value of a currency. And so that's just one of many different ways that blockchain technology can help us accelerate this regenerative future.
Yeah, it's amazing, because I've just been, one of the regenerative podcasts I listened to, they just started talking about the carbon credits and how you can take pH tests and all these cool tests in your soil, and that it's kind of connected to the carbon sink thing like you were talking about earlier. But it gets me excited every day that I just look at that and say, because a lot of the farmers even out here, you know, it's not a rich career. People aren't getting into farming to become, you know, the next Warren Buffett. It's not really what people are doing. But if we can incentivize financially to do the right things, I mean, people are going to do it. That's the craziest part about it. So that, hopefully that's just a little teaser that everyone can go do their deep dive and go down that rabbit hole, because it's a great one with a ton of amazing people in it. But man, we've talked about so much here today, and I just appreciate you guys being on here. Is there anything that we missed that you guys wanted to talk on that we didn't get to cover yet?
I feel like you did a great job of going through a lot of interesting topics, and I'm definitely excited to see how this conversation gets other folks thinking about the way that they're eating, and how they can align their values with the way that they live their lives.
Definitely. I thank you guys so much. Where can people find you guys on all over the internet, the different socials? I know we talked about your guys' TikTok and Instagram, but where can people follow you?
Yeah, so our main channels are on TikTok and Instagram at Groove with Gaia. You can also find our website at groovewithgaia.com, and you can join our mailing list there. We would love to have you there and be able to share upcoming events and different ideas and things coming into our realm that we want to offer to our community.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Chance.
Appreciate you.
The What's on Your Table podcast is brought to you by Ganem Ranch, whose mission it is to provide your family with nutritionally dense pasture-raised meat shipped right to your door. Head over to ganemranch.net to learn more about how they raise their beef and to enter to win a free pack of steaks shipped right to your door.